We had been on the run for more than a month now. I was finally starting to get used to this undercover business, avoiding people, looking over my shoulder, that sort of thing. It was inconvenient, but not the end of the world. Now that we were in South America, though, I had one thing on my mind: the mapinguari. It wasn't one of the most famous cryptids in the world, certainly not on the level of Bigfoot or the Mothman, but it was probably the most famous South American cryptid, and it was a creature I'd always had a soft spot for. Unfortunately, before I could really start researching it, there was actually a cryptid sighting in the region.
Stop sulking.
I'm not sulking.
Yes, you are. Then why is Fritz crying?
Because I'm not petting her.
Well, yeah, that's true. But it's not the only reason.
I was just excited to look for the mapinguari, okay?
Yeah, well, the mapinguari can wait. We've got a sighting. You know we have to strike while the iron is hot.
I know.
It'll still be there. Or not, after this.
I know.
So let's look for this one first, yeah?
Yeah.
Got food.
I'll eat later.
Who pissed in your Cheerios?
He's upset we're not looking for the mapinguari.
No, I'm not. I'm gonna go for a walk.
I like your enthusiasm, kid, but you gotta learn patience. Not just when you're out there in the field, waiting to find an animal. In everything.
I don't need your advice right now.
Then why are you paying me? My experience, right? Well, advice comes from experience.
A little over a week ago, a young boy reported seeing a gigantic snake in the water. So we started to make our way to the town in which the boy lived, and I hit the books.
Alright, so giant snakes. What have you got?
Not a ton, but also not nothing. The creature we're looking for is called the Sucuriju gigante, giant anaconda. The earliest reports come from conquistadors, of course. They recorded stories from the natives about snakes up to 80 feet long that they called matora, meaning bull eater. In 1907, Percy Fawcett, this famous explorer who spent years exploring the Amazon before eventually going missing, he recorded an encounter, and I'll just read it. We were drifting easily along on the sluggish current not far below the confluence of Tigor and the Rio Negro when, almost under the bow, there appeared a triangular head and several feet of undulating body. It was a giant anaconda. I sprang for my rifle as the creature began to make its way up the bank, and, hardly waiting to aim, smashed a .44 soft-nosed bullet into its spine, 10 feet below the wicked head. At once there was a flurry of foam and several heavy thumps against the boat's keel, shaking us as though we had run on a snag. When the snake finally died, they measured it, and it was supposedly 62 feet long, 12-inch diameter. Now, the upper limit of normal anacondas is debated, but from what I could find, it's usually said to be around 30 feet max.
Well, we know other snakes can get bigger. The Uctena was almost 40 feet long.
What's an Uctena?
Horned serpent, which is exactly what it sounds like.
So Fawcett's supposed snake was longer, but not as wide. The Uctena, that thing had a diameter of like 2.5 feet.
A few more sightings from roughly the same time period. In 1922, a man named Father Victor Hines, presumably a priest, claimed to have seen a snake near the Amazon that was 80 feet long. Another man in 1923, F.W. Updegraff.
Updegraff?
That's what it says.
Sounds made up. Maybe an alias.
What? No, I mean, even if it was, it's not important. Anyway, he was going somewhere in a canoe and saw a snake in the water measuring 50 feet. At this point, we go back to Father Hines because apparently he started collecting any giant snake sightings that he could find, which I guess is how we have the rest of these accounts. In 1930, one guy saw a snake with glowing eyes in Rio Hamunda, no size given though. Later that year, another man also claimed to see a snake with glowing eyes in Rio Iguarape, and the last reported sightings were from 1948. One person saw a snake that they claimed was 150 feet long. And later that year, there were 2 newspaper articles with photos about giant snakes that were killed in Brazil, which claimed they measured 131 and 115 feet long, but neither of the photos had any real references for scale, so no one took them seriously.
Not to mention the fog. Pictures wouldn't have come out anyway.
Exactly.
The fog. That's what you call the mind tricks monsters have?
Yeah, my grandpa came up with it.
Not bad.
Alright, a giant snake. That sounds reasonable enough.
Definitely. And, I mean, besides Ictina, there have been other prehistoric snakes that grew to a similar size. Gigantophis, Titanoboa. It was estimated they could be up to like 40 feet long. And, for that matter, could even be one of them that we're after.
It sounds amphibious, too. All these sightings were in or near water.
Yeah, most of them were near the Amazon River, specifically.
Then I wonder what it's doing this far east.
There are a lot of other rivers all over Brazil. Maybe it just, I don't know, got lost.
Maybe.
We kept on the road and eventually reached a town in eastern Brazil. Again, I won't be too specific, but like I said, I was feeling more comfortable living on the run, less nervous. I still didn't want to interview anyone, but I also wasn't staying holed up in my room anymore, which is all a long way of explaining how Mia and I ended up getting lunch at a nice open-air cafe. Across the patio from us sat Faulkner. After a few minutes, a father and his son, maybe 7 years old, sat down. Right away, Faulkner produced a lollipop for the boy and put the father at ease with what I could only assume was a good joke. The two sat down and Faulkner started talking with them.
Wow, he's actually kinda good with kids. Wasn't expecting that.
You finally warming up to him?
I didn't say that.
Come on. It's been over a month now. If he wanted to ditch us or even hurt us, he's had plenty of opportunities. He's been true to his word so far.
I know. He's still a dick, though. And a hunter.
Fritz seems to be okay with him.
Yeah, but she also tries to eat food out of the garbage.
He's like Godzilla.
I'm sorry, what?
Godzilla, the big giant monster?
Yes. I'm aware of what Godzilla is. What's your point?
Okay, so Godzilla, he's a monster. He destroys things, terrorizes Japan, but when all's said and done, anytime another monster shows up, he always defeats it and saves the day.
So you're saying he's, what, a good monster?
I don't know, it made more sense in my head. But, I don't know. I think even bad people can do good sometimes. As long as he's with us, he's not out there doing something worse, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
We'd given Faulkner enough money to treat the pair to lunch, so the three of them ordered food. The father and Faulkner laughed and talked all throughout their meal. When they were finally done, Faulkner paid and the group left. We waited a few more minutes longer before leaving as well. We obviously didn't want anyone to think that the three of us were all together. Then we reconvened at the motel. Seems like that went well. You get anything good?
Not much. The kid couldn't remember what it looked like, but his dad told me what he could. Kid was playing near the water when he heard splashing and went to check it out. He started yelling and ran back inside and told his dad that he saw a giant snake swimming in the water. By the time Dad went out back, there was nothing there.
Any chance it was just his imagination?
The dad said this wasn't usual for him. Kid was screaming and crying when it happened. Whatever he saw, it definitely scared him.
Good enough for me. Should we start packing?
Yeah.
So, we were talking earlier, and if this is a big snake, it's probably dangerous.
Yeah, no shit.
My point is, we want you to come out with us. Just to be safe.
Finally, I've been bored to tears.
I'm so sorry we've been paying you to drive with us and then sit around and watch Brazilian soap operas all day.
Just because it's a good deal doesn't make it any less boring.
We started just outside of town along the river near where the boy had seen the snake. We spent a few days following the river, but no real luck. I took Mia aside at one point to make sure that she hadn't sensed anything with her powers, but no dice there either.
If this thing does stick to the water, it could be long gone by now.
Yeah. Should we call it? Go look for the Mapinguari?
Lucas?
Kidding. Mostly. But really, what now?
Just have to start expanding our range. Cameras, bait.
Meat, I would assume.
Yeah. Faulkner, I think we're gonna leave that part to you.
I can do that.
So we got to work. We coordinated with Faulkner on places to set up cameras and traps. We set most of them up further away from the river, but also placed a few along the banks of the river itself. Thankfully, with Faulkner around, we didn't have to worry about dealing with raw meat for the bait. Turns out there are some benefits to personally bankrolling a mercenary to follow you around the world. After waiting a few days, we returned to find that one of the cameras had been triggered and the bait was gone. Any luck?
Just a fox.
We spent the next few days covering even more ground. I was ready to call it quits when the rainstorm started. But finally, the day after the rain stopped, we actually stumbled upon something. Alright, so I was thinking Whoa!
Shit! Are you okay?
Yeah, just give me a minute.
What even happened? How did we not see this?
I don't know. The ground just sort of collapsed on me. At that moment, I was sitting in a depression in the earth a few feet deep and wide that hadn't been there a minute ago.
This better not be the start of a sinkhole.
What?
Erosion. Underground. It gets bigger and bigger until one day, the ground just opens up and swallows you whole. That is not something I want to mess with.
No, I think I collapsed a tunnel.
A tunnel?
Yeah. Look at this, it's huge. It goes in both directions.
Jeez, that's almost big enough to crawl through. Wait a minute, look up ahead. There are holes all over this clearing. Oh my god!
You okay?
Oh, it's so gross!
What?
Look! It's an earthworm! Oh, ew, 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 ew!
Oh, wow.
Damn, that is one big worm.
What the fuck?
What?
Come over here! Look here! That's its head! This is not a worm! What the fuck is it?
The creature that we had thought was a worm was slithering along the ground, one end coming out of a hole in the dirt, and the other end making its way towards the river. As it slithered into the water, we could all see that it had a mouth and eyes and two, antennae on its nose. Whatever this thing was, we had finally found it. Mia took her usual notes before we finally made our way back out of the wilderness. It looked like we both had research to do.
Making progress?
Yeah. So I did find another cryptid/legend that matches what we saw pretty well. The Minnow Cow. I think that's what we found.
Yeah?
Yeah. The name Minnow Cow comes from Minnow Cow, which is Portuguese for earthworm. It's described as a massive worm with black skin. But, get this, unlike normal worms, legends specifically say that it has a mouth, a pig nose, and two little tentacles on its face.
Well, I'll be damned.
And it's sometimes said to be covered in armor.
It did have banded scales.
Yeah. Reported to be anywhere between 75 and 100 feet in length, and said to dig tunnels up to 15 feet in width. They've actually been blamed for road and house collapses, and supposedly their tunnels are found more often after the rain.
It did rain, like a day before we found it.
Bingo. There were only ever a handful of sightings from the mid-1800s. A naturalist named Augustin Saint-Hilaire, maybe, wrote that they preferred mud and lakes and were predators that would apparently drag horses and cattle underwater.
I find that part hard to believe.
Well, yeah, but still, everything else?
Yeah, that definitely matches what we saw. And I think I know what kind of animal it is.
Besides a giant worm with a weird face, you mean?
Yeah, it turns out they're a group of legless amphibians known as caecilians. Means blind because apparently their eyesight is really poor. Normally they grow up to a few feet long, but they basically look like giant worms, except for the mouth and eyes. And they all possess a set of tentacles between their nose and eyes.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, helps them smell. Not to mention, they usually live in wet tropical regions like, most of South America. See? Look.
Oh, they do look like worms. That is crazy.
And they primarily live underground, but are also capable of swimming.
How about that? Not a snake, not a worm, but an amphibian.
Field notes. Minnow Cow. The minnow cow is an absolutely massive amphibian, and more specifically, a caecilian. It did resemble a worm, with a dark brown, almost black body covered in banded scales. The head is the most striking difference, though. Unlike worms, it had a visible mouth. It had very small, rudimentary eyes. Apparently, caecilian's vision is limited to telling between light and dark, so I have no reason to think the minnow cow is any different. Like other caecilians, it did have 2 tentacles on its snout. Well, normally they're actually just, little protrusions, but on the minnow cow, I would definitely say tentacles is a good description. We couldn't see the entirety of the creature to measure its total length, but as best as we can estimate, it could have been up to 85 or 90 feet long. We were, however, able to measure its diameter, and it was about a foot wide. Little is known about caecilian diets and behaviors. They likely eat a mixture of insects and decaying plant matter. I would expect a similar diet for the minnow cow, but given its size, it probably eats larger plants and creatures like birds and rodents as well. Overall, though, it really wasn't very fast or aggressive, so as long as you stayed away from its mouth, you'd probably be safe. End field notes.
The Cryptid Cases has been a production of Little Giant Monsters. Find out more about us at littlegiantmonsters.com and by searching for Little Giant Monsters on social media. Every Monday after a new episode, we share a cryptid sketch, so be sure to look out for that. If you're enjoying the Cryptid Cases and want to help support us, find us on Patreon. Rewards include behind-the-scenes content, early access to episodes, and access to our Discord. A huge thanks to all our current patrons. Links to our Patreon, our merch, and other shows we're creating are all available on our website or in the description of this episode. Another way to support our work is through ratings and comments on Apple Podcasts and other podcast apps. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.